The defense forces of Ukraine have shifted their focus to destroying Russia's Pacific Fleet after they drove the ships of the Black Sea Fleet, or rather what was left of them, into Novorossiysk and completely expelled them from the occupied Crimea. In Primorsky Krai, in the Peter the Great Gulf, a powerful explosion occurred on August 26. Local residents of the village of Volchanets, near which the Fokino naval base of the Pacific Fleet is located, reported the incident. After that, a huge group of military personnel arrived at the site of the explosion, which indicates that something serious happened. And this happened against the backdrop of a much broader, more troubling picture for the Kremlin. The Russian Black Sea Fleet is already losing control over logistics. The world's largest container company has completely withdrawn from Novorossiysk. And the Russian government is seriously discussing exporting grain from Russia through the Arctic Ocean, just to hide ships in that region from Ukrainian strikes. Because in the waters of the Black and Azov Seas, well, they just get drawn in. At the same time, the cost of transporting Russian oil has almost doubled precisely because of fears of attacks by Ukrainian drones. My name is Alexei Pechi. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like the video and leave your comment. So, let's start with the explosion in the Pacific Ocean. In the footage filmed by eyewitnesses and published by the monitoring channel Supernova Plus, a thick column of smoke can be seen over the sea. And eyewitnesses say that after the explosion, the military was in the area. They arrived there and quickly began, as they say, trying to cover up the consequences. There have been no official comments from the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, which is natural because for them, well, it was just a pop. It's not an explosion after all. But the fact of the explosion has already appeared online, and that's why the Kremlin can no longer hide the fact that even the Pacific Fleet of the Russian Federation has been hit.
Volchanets village, some kind of loud noise, and then this in the sea. An explosion, even an explosion.
And what's the date today?
The 20th? Something like the 20th. Let's check. It's August 26th.
Something good.
Something explosive.
Well, holy shit.
I thought it was a plane, like the ones that usually fly over us.
I just saw it now. No, I didn't see it. That's the aftermath. The military are standing here. Something is smoking over there. And he's there. Something didn't make it all the way, apparently, somewhere.
Currently, the Pacific Fleet is conducting exercises. On August 25, it was reported that Tu-142 anti-submarine aircraft were searching for submarines near the Kuril Islands and carrying out bombing runs on an enemy submarine. And in Peter the Great Gulf itself, at the Anna Bay Naval Training Ground, tactical exercises of naval aviation with live firing and the use of weapons are scheduled for August 27 and 28. The scale of the Pacific Fleet itself is certainly impressive, and that's why the armed forces of Ukraine will have to work hard to defeat this fleet. And according to Naval Review as of August 2026, the Pacific Fleet of the Russian Federation included 20 submarines, including 5 strategic nuclear-powered missile submarines capable of carrying nuclear weapons. 16 out of 20 submarines are currently in combat readiness. It is noteworthy that in recent months, the Russian Ministry of Defense has begun installing protection against drones on submarines. Satellite images from August 4 captured 7 submarines at the Rybachi base of the Pacific Fleet in Kamchatka, covered with anti-drone nets. Similar structures have also appeared at the Naval Fleet base in Gadzievo. This coincided with the expansion of the Ukrainian armed forces' ability to strike remote Russian targets. In particular, in August, drones reached Arkhangelsk Oblast for the first time, which is located almost 2,000 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. Well, drones were also spotted over Severodvinsk, where the White Sea naval base of the Northern Fleet is located. On August 22, due to the threat of attacks, public events in the city were cancelled, so it's already clear that Ukrainian drones are getting close there as well. And now Russians are starting to get nervous and wonder where to hide the Pacific Fleet. But closer to Ukraine, the Russians are facing much more serious problems. Let's discuss what's happening with the Black Sea Fleet and logistics. And here, the problems are much more tangible and, importantly, systemic. The world's largest container carrier, MSC, has suspended accepting new bookings to the port of Novorossiysk after one of its ships was attacked by a drone. The decision was made after the attack on the MSC Ulsan III. On the way to Novorossiysk, an employee of the company's St. Petersburg office confirmed that the company's operations in Novorossiysk have been completely halted. MSC recommended that clients look for alternative routes until conditions allow for the resumption of regular services. So, Russians, you were laughing when Maersk left Odessa, weren't you? How do you like this news? MSC is leaving Novorossiysk. So, compare it, sort of. The capacities of the two countries. How many people do you have? Your population is several times bigger. Russia itself is several times bigger. I don't know, the budget, how much bigger the budget is. And you savages laughed at the fact that some carrier left Ukraine. Well, MSC has left your unwashed Russia. There. And now, well, it's known that the point is that drone attacks on Novorossiysk in general are cutting off Russia's ability to trade. With anything at all. The idea was that Russians need to be completely cut off from the ability to make money. Let them just sit there weaving bast shoes and drinking vodka. That's it. According to Reuters sources in the logistics market, a tense situation had been observed since March, but it escalated in the summer, after the unmanned systems forces of the armed forces of Ukraine began launching mass attacks on ships calling at Russian ports. Up to 10% of all imported container cargo to Russia passed through Novorossiysk, and now this trade has stopped. As you remember, Russia also exported huge volumes of grain, specifically through the Azov and Black Seas. But now Russians no longer have this opportunity. And here is the culmination of this whole story, what the Russian government has come to in an attempt to save grain exports. Let me remind you. In 2022, Putin promised Russians that he would demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. But the main thing was demilitarization, that Ukraine would have no weapons at all. As a result, today, the Ministry of Agriculture of the Russian Federation announced the creation of an operational headquarters for grain exports, which has been almost completely paralyzed due to drone strikes on Black Sea ports. In mid-August, after drone attacks, 3 of them stopped operating at once. The grain terminals of the Novorossiysk port, through which a total of about 20 to 25 million tons of grain were exported. Since July, the grain terminal at Taman has been shut down and navigation through the Kerch Strait has been suspended. As a result, the government of the Russian Federation is considering the possibility of exporting grain via the Northern Sea route, simply in the hope of hiding this grain from Ukrainian drone strikes. Currently, more than 95% of Russia's total grain export capacity through the Black and Azov Seas is closed. The only operational port left in this region is Tuapse, but its capacity is only 250,000 tons per month. That's really insignificant. Russian wheat exports in August dropped to a 16-year low, less than 2 million tons. And most of this volume was exported in the first half of August, while Novorossiysk was still operating. So now it's almost down to zero. Compared to August 2025, export volumes have dropped by a factor of 2.5. You know, I rarely quote Russians, but this is a different case. The president of the Russian Grain Union, Arkady Zlochevsky, is extremely skeptical and says, "There are no real alternative channels for exporting grain. To export through the Baltic Sea, you need the ports of Latvia and Lithuania." And as he says, if they even agree to let Russian cargo through. Well, you remember that these wild Russians have quarreled with just about everyone. And let me remind you, they even threatened Latvia and Lithuania with war. They shouted, "Who do you think you are? We'll come and restore order. We'll deal with you." In Ukraine, they said they'd take Kiev in 3 days. It's the same story there. Now this Arkady Zlochevsky is sitting and crying. He's just whining. How are we supposed to sell our grain? Now we're finished. We can't sell anything anymore. And the only option through the Baltics is, well, to ask Lithuania and Latvia, "Please, we beg you, accept our grain and sell it through your ports." Well, to this picture of the maritime collapse, it's worth adding a detail that we already discussed in the previous episode. The cost of transporting Russian oil to India has soared to multi-year highs because of those same attacks. The freight for a Suezmax-class tanker from Novorossiysk itself has risen to $20 million, while just a month earlier it cost around $13 million. And before the full-scale war, it was even less. And traders openly talk about risk premiums and ship owners' unwillingness to risk their crews for the sake of Russian ports. So that announced 20 million figure are not the final cost yet. They say, "Okay, 20 million, but you need to add more money so that our people will even go and put themselves at risk for your stinky Russian oil." So the problem concerns not only grain and container cargo, but also the main source of money for the Kremlin, which is the export of oil itself. The result? The explosion at Fokin on the other side of Russia at the Pacific Fleet is happening against the backdrop of what has already happened in the Black Sea. The world's largest container carrier has completely left Novorossiysk. The grain export of the Russian Federation has collapsed to a 16-year low. And the government is seriously discussing the transfer of cargo through the freezing Arctic Ocean. And all to physically hide the ships from Ukrainian drones. Now that's what I call the war returning to where it started. That's right, Russians should be hiding from this war. They should just crawl into their holes like rats and take responsibility for the war they started against Ukraine. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions, your conclusions and your emotions in the comments under this episode. Subscribe to the channel, like this episode and don't forget to hit the bell so you don't miss new episodes on this channel. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye everyone.